what changes are necessary, and I believe we cannot leave it as it is. We are going to lose a trained woman graduate, and we also lose the husband who's going to be a plus. And many of them would like to come and work here. So if they are highly trained, I say, give them the PR. After 2-3 years, they can adjust, they want to take citizenship, let them. Then the children will become citizens. Then even if they are divorced, the wife can stay with their children in Singapore. Because the Singapore woman is not so stupid. She knows that white men marry you freely, they also divorce you freely. And I believe the children will also be a plus because they are going to be highly competent and well-trained persons. Of course, you know there are innate prejudices, and I do not pretend that I don't share those prejudices. I do. I mean, if one of my sons had come back and says, I've got a young lady whom I've met in America, and my first question is, what color is she? Must be. You know, the cruelest joke that was told of a royal family, that the princess had gone to America and married an American black. And disaster. It was completely untrue. But even an American white was still considered a blow to the royal family. Far better if they had married within the tribe, so to speak. Now, this being so, one way to solve the problem for their children is to hyphenate the names. This is regularly done in many countries. You see there, you know, Smith Jones or some such combination, you put a hyphen. So when you bring home your boyfriend, he doesn't quite look Chinese, but he does look a little Chinese, and he has a name which is Smith, but he's also got, says Tan Smith. Or so the resistance will be less. So in that way, we can meld into the next generation. Now, these are extremely difficult problems, but we got to face up to the problem and not dodge it. I read this young man today in the Sunday Times about how his mother is a Dutch woman and his father was an Indian, and you know, he doesn't care what people call him. I fully understand him, and I sympathize totally with his point of view. At the same time, I have to accept the world as it is. It is first how you perceive yourself. Next, how the other person, how your wife or your family perceives you. Third, how does the world, strangers, perceive you? And we have to keep these denominations, because when you deal with them in block, in numbers, in the army or any other place, you got to know what food, what allocation, and so on. It is necessary. So, whilst gradually we'll all become Chinese Singaporeans, with the emphasis on Singaporeans, I fully agree with the young man. I coined the word Singaporean first. I used it from about the 1970s to establish the point that we can become one distinct identity. But we are not going to be a homogenized identity. There is no such thing as I'm just a Singaporean. There is no such thing as I'm just an American. You're either a black American or a white American or a Hispanic American or an Asian American. And if you do not accept that, then you are deceiving yourself and you're in for a lot of unpleasantness. I used to phone up for accommodation when I was a student in England. You know, my name is Lee, also spelled the English way, L-E-E. And I used to, when I was in England, I spoke English like the English do. And the receptionist or the landlady can't tell the difference. So I make quite sure after my first experience, look, I am Chinese, you know. I gave her a way to say, I have no accommodation, or I'm sorry, we don't take Asians. Saves a lot of trouble. That's just to live and lodge in a room. What more to marry my daughter? So you see, let's not deceive ourselves. I think these things are important, and this is one way of solving it. But as I told Chatong, look, this is your problem by the time these children grow up, I won't be here. So, but they will grow up, they will have children. If you let them in, there'll be large numbers of them. But of course, we are encouraged because, you see, the PAP has got several such families, ministers and non-ministers. Teh Eng Soon, Ma Bao Tan, Wan Soon Bee, Lim Chiong. And let me tell you that all their children are doing famously in school, as you have seen. I mean, one won a President's Scholarship recently. So why do we want to turn these people away? Now, in their case, it's easy because she is something Tay, is it? Rosalind Tay. So, there isn't the same, the resistance isn't so great. So, well, not too bad after all. But I say, this is amongst the things we have to do. We have to desensitize questions of race, questions of language, questions of culture, so that we can talk to each other in a calm, rational way. There's no use, it's futile kidding ourselves, deceiving ourselves. These are important things. So when Rajaratnam says, Malaysian, Malaysia, therefore we must have a Singaporean, Singapore, I read him, I said, Raja's getting forgetful. When we said Malaysian, Malaysia, if you tell the Malay that he will become a Malaysian and he's no longer a Malay, he'll be very, very unhappy. He doesn't mind becoming a Malay Singaporean, but he wants to remain a Malay and identifiable as a Malay. And there are many Chinese who will be very upset if they can't identify their children as Chinese. It doesn't mean that they're going to be China Chinese. They are very different from us. Even Taiwan Chinese. And indeed, so many who have taken unkindly to our 25,000 Hong Kongers, they have emphasized to me how different the Hong Kongers are. Yes, up to a point. But in the next generation, they can become Chinese Singaporeans, because there is that irreducible identity in the person, the ethnic and cultural whole that will not change. The values can change. The attitudes, the sense of identification, that will change. But not abiding beliefs and how you see yourself. There are other items which should be desensitized or smoothed over, regulated, muted, like religious differences and the way we start converting other people into our religion. I'm glad that they have decided to go on with this religious harmony bill. I tell you the difference between them and me, really. I mean, simple. If I was in charge, as I was in the early 80s or early or 70s, I would not have had such a long debate, white paper, discussion groups, dialogues, and so on. The answer to me was quite obvious. This has got to stop or we are in trouble. A bill would have been introduced, it goes to select committee, is thoroughly discussed and debated, is on, pass. And it will work. That's how we got here. But all right, no harm. Provided it's not going to lead to interreligious conflict, let's take a few years. It doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, remember, if a thing is going to get better, if you leave it alone, then leave it. Maybe it'll get better. But if you know it's going to get worse, it's totally irresponsible to leave it. And that's the reason why I brought out unmarried graduates in 1983. I'll give you the result of my bringing this out. I brought it out in 83. At that time, only 37.6% males graduates married women graduates. By bringing it out, we increased 4% each year, 41, 45, 49. Then we slipped 1 year, minus 1.4%. Then we went up by 3.6. Then we stagnated last year. Now this year we've gone back by 1.5%. Now I know this is going to be a long process. We have made progress, right? But that's a long way from solving the problem. What does that figure tell us? This comes from the marriage registry. So the figures are absolutely correct. Wife's education, groom's education, bride's education. It means that 50% of graduate girls will either marry down, marry foreigners, or stay unmarried. It's a very unhappy position for any country to be in. Were we right or wrong to bring it out? I have no regrets. It caused a little unhappiness. People laughed at the idea of SDU, but let me show you how we produce some results. Now, when we started in 85, 1,300 joined. They were 7% of total unmarried graduates. Now in 89, we have nearly 10,000 who are 34% of unmarried graduates. In other words, the unmarried graduates know that they have a problem. I'm not saying the problems are easy to solve, but the recognition that there is the problem is the beginning of a solution. So you see 85 SDU members marrying themselves, each other, 91, 111, 200, 200, 239. Now this year it seems to have gone down a little. First half year, well, maybe 240, same as last year. So some progress. I'm hoping that, of course, as a spin-off, they've met others outside, and so SDU can't claim credit. In fact, numbers have gone up. Another issue which was also very sensitive, and I give credit to Goh Chok Tong for having the gumption to tackle it, that's to reverse our population policy. He did it, I did not. I said, look, this is your problem, it's going to take a long time to reverse. If you like, start now. He did, he gave all those incentives, income tax rebates and so on. Now I'll show you the results. In the fertility rate, TFR means total fertility rate. Now you see 85, births, 86 went down, 87, 88 went up. Of course, this was dragon year. 52, and total fertility rate went almost to 2, right? From 1.4 in 86. Now, our pessimists thought it will go down back to 1.4, but it stayed up at 1.8, and last year it was about 50,000, and this year, first half, is going to stay around 50,000. Now, which means you take the flak. Yes, people grumble. Why are we changing policy? Because circumstances have changed, and a continuation of the policy will be criminal neglect of knowing something has gone wrong. So they took measures, and results. A plus. Which brings me to my next subject, the kind of government Singapore needs.